as I said, it's not very sexy in a security sense. It's not a sexy profession, which is why it's still more or less hidden. It's an invisible foundation in governance. But
I think it is. I think it's subtle sexy, Andre. Come on.
The subtle sexy, yes. You should write an article about that. The subtle sexiness.
I think our second episode ever, I think I titled it something like "Getting into the Sexy World of IAM" or something like that. So it sprang into my mind when you said that. I was like, all right, I think I remember like 5 years ago writing a show title like that.
Well, I try to get people to understand that IAM can be sexy. So we're talking about zero trust and policy-based access control and all that new modern stuff, which really makes it sexy. So there's new developments that really help for getting more to the forefront. So it will help. It will grow.
Well, if we didn't have to worry about DRM, I would play the Right Said Fred, I'm too sexy for, and then, fade out. So maybe that's what I'll do for this one.
This is Identity at the Center. If it has anything to do with IAM, this is the go-to podcast. Now your hosts, Jim McDonald and Jeff Stedman.
Welcome to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm Jeff, and that's Jim. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Jeff. How are you?
Oh, not so bad. Yourself?
Doing great. So I've been thinking a lot about training and professional development lately. And I think really there's a couple things, right? One is training and development for people who are just entering the industry. There are a few really good resources out there. Andrew Chanthone with his YouTube channel, David Lee with what he's doing on LinkedIn. I think those are fantastic outlets. There's a lot of kind of 101 level information out there. Obviously, for the more advanced learner, one website that I've become familiar with recently is Pluralsight. So Pluralsight has a lot of information. Now, this is not an advertisement for Pluralsight, but has a lot of good courseware and preparation materials for certifications. Now, I can't say from personal experience that they will properly prepare you, but it's at least a starting point. And then, of course, YouTube has a ton of great content. And obviously, if you're linked in with any partners, usually, or with technology vendors, they have partner portals that have a lot of great information. And don't forget, probably the best two for everybody is the Identity at the Center podcast,
of course,
wealth of knowledge, and the IDPro body of knowledge. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about that today.
Yeah, so I guess free commercial there for Pluralsight. Pluralsight, you want to sponsor? Hit me up. I used Pluralsight to actually pass an AWS certification late last year. So obviously that in conjunction with other things. But always be sharpening the saw, as Jim likes to say. Lots of good resources out there. I got nothing else to add to that.
Well, I think that you've been a fan of what Andrew's doing for quite a while.
Yeah, I just saw LinkedIn. He's doing some stuff on LinkedIn again, so kudos to him. That's pretty cool to get on LinkedIn Learning again. I saw a picture, I think, with him in front of like a green screen or something like that, which is very neat. So congrats to Andrew on that. Another LinkedIn Learning class. So starting to rack them up, man. So we got some conferences that are coming up here in the next really couple of weeks. Time is running out. Authenticate, you and I are going to be there, Jim. We are working on a exciting show that we're going to be putting on the main stage. I'm not spoiling yet what we're going to be doing, but there is a survey that has gone out to people. And so I plead with people to answer the questions that they might have received from the FIDO Alliance for the FIDO Authenticate conference coming up here in a couple of weeks. It's October 14th to the 16th in Carlsbad, California. We have a discount code. You better get on it because it's coming up. IDAC15 gets 15% off of your registration. So we hope to see a lot of people there. And thanks to those who've already used the code that shows support for the show. It doesn't cost you anything. Doesn't cost anything, but shows support that we can, drive folks to attend. But again, I will plead, if you've gotten an email from FIDO, there is a link to a survey. It asks you some questions. Please fill it out. we are going to be using it. That is an identity designer thing that we're going to be doing with the FIDO Alliance as part of sort of opening ceremonies and kind of things that will be happening that day. So
yeah, we'll also be podcasting there, Jeff. So we're going to have a little side, I don't know. I don't want to call it a
We'll
booth.
be somewhere.
We're going to be somewhere. So we're going to record a few episodes so folks who are in attendance can kind of see the show as we do it live.
Yeah. I think the plan right now is we'd be somewhere in like the expo hall area. It's a little more visible maybe than kind of last year. We were kind of stuck in a back corner, which is great for like sound quality, but it was very difficult, I think, for people to kind of find. But we should be, hopefully, we will be around somewhere podcasting. So feel free to come up, watch, listen, and, get an official fist bump of gratitude from WA. Let's see. The week after that, Jim, we're going from California all the way to Florida. We're going to be at the SailPoint Navigate conference. This is kind of a late breaking one, but we actually have a discount code for that we just got. So if you use the code IDAC and you're planning on attending SailPoint Navigate October 21st to the 24th in Orlando, Florida, they get you $400 off. That's another one that's coming up here pretty quickly in the next couple of weeks. So definitely wanting on that. But that's another one, Jim, you and I are planning on doing some recording at that episode, or that conference, I should say. And I think I'm doing some sort of presentation with our friend Chad from RSM. RSM is a sponsor there, and they are our employers. So one of the benefits is, they get to bring us along and expand the word.
And we'll be in the land of the mouse, which I think is cool. I like Orlando, Jeff. I remember being there with you in January, and it's 70 degrees. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so hot.
It was come on, be fair to me, man. It was 7 degrees, but like 85% humidity. It's gross.
It was pretty muggy. But if you travel from the great, the winterous north, it feels good to get a break from that.
I disagree. I would rather be cold than hot and humid, but that's just me. What can I say? I'm a strange bird, but I am looking forward to being in Orlando. I'm looking forward to be indoors in Orlando in that sweet, sweet air conditioning. So I stay nice and cool and dry, but I'm sure I'll still be sweating because it's still Florida.
Yeah. And maybe we can find our friend of the show, Sean O'Denity. I know he's an Orlando resident as well. So shout out to Sean.
Yeah, and we're looking to get him back on the show. We're going to give kind of an update, I think, maybe on like CAPE and SSF and some things in the future. So that'll be coming up here. We're kind of working on logistics on that. So looking forward to get Sean and Atul back on the show.
Yeah, it's getting really hot. I'm not talking about the Orlando weather. I'm talking about the whole shared signals framework.
Yeah, so hot right now. All right, why don't we talk identity today? We've got the business case for identity and access management. So there's an article that we found on the IDPro website, and Jim, you and I are members, as well as the author of that, Andre Koot. He's the author of the business case for IAM. We'll have a link in our show notes for people to check that out. But welcome to the show, Andre.
Thank you, Jim. Yes, and glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time. You're joining us from the Netherlands. So it's, let's see, local time for me right now is 10:52 a.m. What time is it in the Netherlands?
Well, it's 10 to 5 in the afternoon.
Okay.
So ready to do that later on after the show.
Well, always leave on a high note. So that's probably a good thing, right? You're on the podcast here with us. First time you've been on the show. So tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get into the world of identity and access management? Did you choose it or did it choose you?
It didn't exist when I started. So I've been in identity access management for 25 years, and I came from the security end, you could say. And before that, my training started as a financial accountant for the tax department doing fraud investigations. Well, and later on I learned fraud is, of course, abuse of authorizations. So you could say from the school, I've been working authorization management. So it didn't exist as a profession. It's a new profession, and I got into it in the Twitch 25 years ago, when it's still very much IT oriented, much more about making accounts, creating accounts, and later on the identity stuff came to it. So I've been there for quite a long time. First as an internal employee in staff for tax department and some insurance companies, and later as a consultant working in identity access management. So that's my background a little. 3.5 years ago, almost 4 years ago, in midst of Corona, I started my own company with two friends. and it's called Sonic B. And we decided to specialize in identity access management, but within IAM, we specialized in business consultancy. So we stay away from technology. That's the easy part. And that's why we got some interesting use case for customers. And that's where also this article came from. So I can explain some more about that, but that's where the article came from. Every customer wants to know, why should I do anything in IAM? And what does it cost, what does it bring? So in fact, this article and the other articles I wrote for IDPro came from my practice experience as a consultant, helping customers and trying to share the knowledge we have. So that's my background a little. Let me dive into it a little more. I joined IDPro always from the start. And then we learned about the IDPro mission and, for instance, sharing knowledge. The body knowledge came to exist, and I joined the body knowledge committee from the start. And so I've been there 4 years now. I'm not sure. Heather will know. So I've been in the body knowledge committee, writing articles, reviewing articles, helping set up the direction of the body knowledge. And that's where we are now.
Well, we're all about sharing the knowledge, so that is great. And thank you for contributing right to the domain of identity with this type of stuff. So I think this is the perfect time to have you on the show, because we just released an episode that kind of talked about building up an IAM program. What does it take to start an IAM program? And one of those things was getting stakeholder buy-in. And it's very difficult to get stakeholder buy-in without a business case, right? Because they're going to ask, okay, well, what's in it for me or my organization, or what do I get out of it? So I'm really glad that you're on the show. So, thanks for setting aside the time for us.
I like joining, and I just want to say it's a relevant topic. And most of the times when we start at customers for any project, it starts at the IT department. Most IAM projects or issues are IT related, are assumed to be IT related problems. And we of course know it's not. It's always business oriented. So when the IT people start an IAM project, they need to have a business case. They need to have funding for that. And this is why this article came from. We need to find the ways to help IT or business understand what are the costs and the benefits of doing IAM or not doing IAM. So it's come from our mission for the company as well. We try to do business consultancy. We should help businesses understand the need for identity, and especially access management, access governance in the broad sense. So yes, I can relate to what you said, Jeff.
So Andre, you're making a strong case around that this IAM is about business. So what makes a good business case for identity access management investments?
That's the hardest question you could ask, Jim. So what's a good business case? In the article, I try to find a few viewpoints to look at investment need for investment possibilities. And the most important viewpoint, in my perspective, is not just looking at a financial business case. So what does it cost? What does it bring? What's the return of investment? That should be simple to do, but it's very hard in IAM. There's a second part. It's not the non-financial business case. It's about what does IAM bring you from a risk management and governance compliance perspective, from an end user perspective. And these are perhaps non-quantifiable. You cannot, calculate the money that it costs or brings. Whereas for a financial business case, you could, of course, try to calculate the cost of investment, the cost of support, implementation, the cost of training, whatever. But from the non-financial point of view, costs are more difficult. It's mostly non-financial, as I said. So the disadvantage of doing IAM from a non-financial perspective are mostly like culture, like getting used to new ways of working, losing a victim, losing ways to blame people because you're automating stuff that's being done manually. You can also blame someone who did it wrong. But in automating, doing IAM, you try to automate it, you're losing that blaming perspective. So there's a different way of looking at it. So if you're doing a good business case, you have to look both at the financial business case. So what does it cost? What does it bring? We get into that later, I guess, in more depth. But you should also look at what does it cost me, my organization, to invest in IAM? What does it bring? Not from a financial perspective. So do I get better governance? I'm more compliant, laws and regulations, that makes it easier. How about user convenience, which is also harder to calculate? So there's a lot of things you have to look at for a good business case. So a bad business case, in my opinion, if it's only about cost, if you just say, well, a tool like an identity governance tool, it will cost 1 million and it doesn't bring any money, well, that's a lousy business case. So I try to make fun of this, but big fancy business case, you will not make money of IAM unless you're a vendor or consultant. So businesses making a business case, financial business case, you will not make money. You don't get profit by investing in IAM. You perhaps may get a lot of financial benefits, but you'll not result in profits. But that's the same if you're investing in an ERP system, for instance, or a CRM system. You will invest a lot of money in an ERP system. It will not give any profit. But that's for IAM, it feels differently. It feels not the same. Investing in ERP, you have to, because your business continuity depends on it. But for IAM, there's hardly any business need or hardly any need. You will not go bankrupt if you don't do IAM. So that's difficult to say. So it's a good business case. It should look at the investments in IAM, both from a financial perspective and from a non-financial perspective. Now, in the article, it said quantitative versus qualitative. Quantitative meaning you can calculate the costs and the benefits, and qualitative, no calculation at all. It's just go for it. Believe in it.
It feels good.
Feels good, yes.
Yeah, well, there was a lot that you said there, Andre, and I want to unpack a few things. So you talked about the risk reduction versus you're not going to make money off of IAM unless you're a vendor. I kind of feel like there's a difference for the workforce IAM investments versus customer IAM investments, where I do think they can be at least part of driving the business revenue, right? You can make a business case that, hey, customer IAM is an enabler of doing some major digital transformation project on the customer-facing side where it increases revenue. Do you agree?
I fully agree. And there are some more financial and perhaps non-financial bonuses from customer IAM, for instance, which are not in the employee or privileged access management environments. So for customer environments, I know the case for a customer who has 7 different portals, 7 different customer portals. So converging is a big benefit to invest in new CIAM platform to migrate all those different portals to one backend. It will definitely save money, partly because there's some old technology left and some technical debt. So if you invest in new stuff, you can move ahead, you can be more scalable, you can ditch all that old stuff which you don't want anymore. Second, a silly perspective from CIAM, for instance, if your competitor is investing in new bells and whistles CIAM product, well, we often see that the competitors is what drives our customer to do the same. So yeah, my competitor has got a new bells and whistles CIAM product. I need it as well. Or so there's a different business case. It not really financial. It will not make a lot of money, except for perhaps you can save money by ditching all stuff. It will not give a profit, but it will may be able to reduce cost in other domains.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes intuitively a business may know it needs to do something like digital transformation, and identity is part of that, but still want to see you go through the exercise of making a business case that's compelling, that's going to grow the business. Or I think one of the things that you brought up earlier was manage risk. So manage or reduce the risk of something catastrophic happening to the business. Go through that exercise. We know we need to do it, but go through that exercise of How is this going to help the business?
Well, those risks you mentioned, these are relevant. For instance, data breaches, they're all over the place every day. And data breaches, of course, are, in my opinion, well, I may be overdoing it, but it's mostly wrongly executed access control. Too many people with too many authorizations. A hacker need not have authorization. Why do they get access? Because some other level access control is not well implemented. So IAM, in that sense, is really a business continuity item. You need to have access control in a decent way to prevent accidents happening. So it's a risk reduction process, risk reduction policy, you could say. So you have to identify those risks. It's all about, for instance, data breaches is relevant. Ransomware the same. Why should any user have access to rights to a server when they don't need the right? So it's all the same. Too many people have too many authorizations, and that's that gives all kinds of rights. I read another article in the Bit of Knowledge about privileged access management, and I showed a nice example about too many authorizations for too many people, which is a relevant issue. There was the issue of some of the old presidents posting tweets about, send me 1 Bitcoin and I'll send you 2 back. And as I explained in the article, privileged access management article, it's all due to the fact that some criminal found the credentials to log into the management system of Twitter to make it possible to revoke authorizations and to post those messages. So it's a silly risk, but you have to manage it. So make sure that your authorizations are kept, are well kept, are maintained well, that they're only available to people who need those authorizations. And that's where identity access management is, as I said, it's not very sexy in a security sense. It's not a sexy profession, which is why it's still more or less hidden. It's an invisible foundation in governance. But
I think it is. I think it's subtle sexy, Andre. Come on.
The subtle sexy, yes. You should write an article about that. The subtle sexiness.
I think our second episode ever, I think I titled it something like "Getting into the Sexy World of IAM" or something like that. So it sprang into my mind when you said that. I was like, all right, I think I remember like 5 years ago writing a show title like that.
Well, I try to get people to understand that IAM can be sexy. So we're talking about zero trust and policy-based access control and all that new modern stuff, which really makes it sexy. So there's new developments that really help for getting more to the forefront. So it will help. It will grow.
Well, if we didn't have to worry about DRM, I would play the Right Said Fred, I'm too sexy for, and then, fade out. So maybe that's what I'll do for this one. You talked about risk and we talked about business case. And I think one of the most important things that comes out of this is the return on investment. Everyone always wants to know, what am I getting for my money, my investment, my time allocation? Because it's not just money. Sometimes it's, hey, we're going to invest people into this as well and their time. And so how do we talk about return on investment as part of this business case? I kind of want to break this down in a couple of ways, but maybe we start at the high level. And then you also mentioned earlier, the difference between quantitative and qualitative or subjective benefits. Sure, there are things you'll be able to measure, right? But there's also things where I kind of mentioned before, it's like, it just feels good. We should be doing that. And maybe to some degree, that's kind of where you were going with, well, our competitors are doing it, we've got to keep up, or something along those lines. Maybe we can start with that kind of macro question of, how do we talk about return on investment in a business case?
Yeah, let me first explain return on investment as a topic. It's an economical meaning. It means if you invest 1 million and end of the year you got 1,100,000 in cash, the return is 100,000, meaning if you calculate it's a 10% return on investment. So your profit will be 100,000 on the invested of a million, meaning it's 10% in this year of your return on investment, your profits. And so that means that it assumes that you can investigate, that you can calculate the investment. It assumes that you can calculate the return, and that if those two values are there, you can calculate the return on investment. That's relatively simple. It's a simple model. It's an old model, economical model, and we can try to use it. But in IAM, there are few different issues that make it difficult to calculate return on investment. One of the things I wrote in the article makes this very difficult is not just investing in coming up with the investment sum. You can calculate the investment. You get a proposal from a vendor, say, well, you got 1 million, you got to implement it and do some training. So the total investment will be 2 million next year. That's quite easy. But then you have to, in fact, invest additional. Your employees have to get training, so they cannot work if they do training. You have some errors to respond to fix. You've got some other quality issues you have to fix. So it will not be 2 million, it's perhaps 3 million. So the investment sum itself is kind of difficult to calculate. But even more difficult to calculate is the return. And for instance, if you got the business and you sell widgets for 1 million and you get 100,000 as a return, so you make nice profit on widgets, selling widgets, that's nice. But in IAM, you don't sell identities, you don't sell authorizations. So that means that you have to get your investment in a different way, mostly in the order of savings. So savings will, in fact, help you get a return on investment. So if you do something, if you have less to do, less work is a benefit, is a you could say return on investment. So, for instance, if you can automate the join and move lever process, whereas normally it would take 1 hour to create an account, now you can automate that. You just have to calculate the number of accounts that have to be created or removed, times the hourly rate, then you get the total sum of the cost that you can save if you automate. So that's not too difficult to calculate. But there's another issue. For instance, suppose you have a standard calculation for his password resets. It's the same issue. Password resets, it takes half an hour. And if you calculate enough password resets, you can, in fact, ditch your service desk because all password resets can be automated. But that never happens because if a service desk employee is not resetting a password, he's doing other stuff. Perhaps other stuff that needs to be on some backlog. So, in fact, you have a return on investment, but you cannot calculate it because there's no return. You cannot fire any employee because the work's not longer there. People will do other things. So it's hard to calculate. So you have to effectively try to investigate what are the returns on the investments to make it possible to calculate the return on investment. So the real value in IAM is partly financial. And in the article, there is a PDF in the article with a lot of tables in there, and there are some formulas. I tried to come up with some formulas about what is the investment, what the return on investment. You have to, well, I don't know how to call it in English, but it's take it with a grain of salt, the formulas. So there are some formulas, for instance, the number of joiners times the time it costs to make an account and times the rate of an employee doing it. It will give some idea about the cost savings of automating join and move leave process. It's only a rough estimation.
Andre, I think what you're talking about is the difference between hard dollar savings and soft dollar savings, right? So with soft dollar savings, you are mostly getting those through efficiency, whereas hard dollar savings come from the idea of like letting people go. Or if you're in an outsourced model, it might be easier to measure. I've always felt like that was something that, if you're paying a dollar amount for password resets to an outside firm, and you can actually reduce those numbers, you actually achieve savings. That's hard dollars. But if what you're talking about is using the help desk example that you mentioned, you are making the help desk more efficient, then that's soft dollars. It seems like executives are always willing to listen to hard dollar savings cases, and the bar is also much lower. But hard dollar savings are hard to achieve, especially when you're talking about reducing risk for the organization. I can hardly even think of an example where you reduce your security risk, reduce the risk of a data breach, reduce the risk that you're going to be on the front page of the New York Times. where you achieve hard savings by doing that. But you do achieve savings in terms of, wow, if that were to happen, there is a dollar value to that. So I guess I'm throwing two issues at you at once. The first is hard dollars versus soft dollars, which I think you talked about. The second is this idea of dollarizing non-savings type of benefits. So you'd have a benefit of enabling or, making the organization more efficient or reducing risk. Is there a time to try to turn that into, okay, we project $1 million in savings and here's how we achieve that calculation? Or in your mind, is that just a waste of time?
It's not a real waste of time. It will not be a compelling argument to do the investment. It helps, enables investment decisions, perhaps. So you really have to try to come up with different saving categories. So like in the articles, I think some 50 or 80, I'm not sure, I didn't calculate it, arguments or motives to do the investment. So you can use this article to come up with your own evaluation of the case. So we have to come up with the business case, identify the qualitative and the quantitative benefits, of course, for the topics. And it may not be valid for every organization, but it may help convince the stakeholders who are decision makers. And there are a lot of arguments to be made for investing, and the hard dollar versus soft dollar, it does in fact help. Although, again, you have to take it with a grain of salt. For instance, one of the benefits will be risk reduction. For instance, if you've got a supervisory agency or so, like the banking environment, or the European legislation about GDPR, there's a total fine of 4% of the global revenue. That's the maximum fine, you could say. Yeah, that's nice, but that's not the risk. The risk is the discovery of the issue, and then the calculation of, okay, we have discovered we made a mistake, so we are finable. But what's the real risk? What do we don't save the whole fine, the maximum. It will not be the risk that we save. That will not be the saving. So there must be some, you have to try to find out the real saving, potential saving of this event. So it's hard to come up with this hard dollar calculation. So it's not black and white, you could say, but it will help convince decision makers that they are less likely to be on the New York Times front page because there's an incident. So less likely to have this event, less likely to be a target. So all these arguments may help convince decision makers to do an investment.
At the risk of getting to like inception level, now I'm wondering, do we need to do an ROI on the ROI? How much time should I spend building, right, the ROI for the business case? And I'm curious, like, are there levels of, okay, and maybe it's context. I'm talking to one person and maybe it's, hey, I think this is a good idea. What do you think? And maybe the executive says, yeah, why don't you go look at that a little bit more and come back to some high level numbers. And then maybe it's like, okay, yeah, that seems like we're directionally correct. Maybe now is the time to do like a full blown ROI, like to get maybe project approval. Do you think that that's a viable method to kind of start? Because it seems almost daunting to say, oh my gosh, I have to now figure out the risk of maybe the discoverability of maybe us might get a fine and then reputational damage, right? How do you quantify that kind of stuff? You think that's a viable approach?
No, it's not a viable approach, in my opinion. So there are the quantifiable components. You can try to come up with some kind of calculation. So, well, we can save a few $100,000 dollars per year because of automation. So efficiency benefits. The non-efficiency oriented benefits are hard to quantify. You could say we have some less reputation damage if something happens. What's the value of that? Well, I'm not sure. It depends on the reputation damage. Same for the risk of fines or end user satisfaction. How do you calculate the end user satisfaction of automation? So it's hard to come up with different issues. There are some hard non-quantifiable issues or some hard qualitative aspects versus audit findings. If there's an audit finding, mostly starts with the color yellow, then it's got orange, and then red, and then it's too late. You could say there's really a benefit of fixing audit findings. Too many admin accounts, okay, or too many authorizations in the financial system, okay. No segregation of duties, okay. These are, in fact, non-financial, but very strict findings that you have to fix. Otherwise, your accountant will come up with a negative opinion about your going on. So there are some hard qualitative components that you can identify that you have to fix, and it will not bring any money. It will give you some sustainability in the organization, perhaps, but it will not make any money. Perhaps it will save money because you don't get a fine, or you get some other. I'm not sure about that, but these are hard, but not quantifiable components. So if you say, is it viable to come up with a calculation for an ROI? I say go for the quantifiable components that you can identify. So like in the article, where the formulas are added in the article, there are some quantifiable components that you could identify. But for the rest, I say, alas, no financial business case. But there are so many other benefits.
Hey, I've got a thought on this as well, which is, so when I was in business school, we learned how to do net present value calculations. And the example was Boeing is building the 777. It's going to take 20 years to build, sell these planes, and then at the end, that plane is no longer, it's reaches end of life. They're going to stop building them. And they have a lot of expenditures in the first 5 years, and then the income starts coming in, the revenue. And so the revenue gets discounted by year. It's a very complex calculation, right? To do that, to spend $50,000 on an enhancement to a privilege, to stand up a secrets vault, that is absolutely crazy. But it also gets me thinking about two things. One is, I think certain organizations have a certain level of sophistication around doing return on investment calculations. Some organizations, and it's not even the organization, it probably has a lot to do with the size of the effort, but in some cases, the size of the effort requires you to do a break-even analysis. So, okay, show us when we're going to get our money back. And that's what I was talking about earlier with Andre with, trying to, run through the case just so that you realize the value. What is the return? I'm going to spend $50,000 or $100,000. How is that beneficial to the organization? I think the other scenario is where you want to spend multiple millions of dollars on something. And that's where I still think it depends on, okay, what is the organization expecting to see? Just because you're spending $3 million doesn't mean you have to do net present value calculations, unless that's what your CFO or, the ultimate decision maker on that investment is going to require.
Let me push back here for a second, though, because I think we're talking relative terms here. So for some organizations, $50,000 is a rounding error, a drop in the bucket, doesn't matter. For some, that is a lot of money. And so I think this is a little bit organizational size and maybe scope and kind of driven to say, look, we're going to spend $50,000 on this, and maybe we only have a budget of $100,000. You're saying you want to use half of my budget to do this thing? That's a very significant decision for that organization. But I'm with you. I think you have to kind of take this from an organizational approach and say, okay, what are the thresholds? How much rigor do we need to do return investment? And a lot of organizations that I've been a part of and seen and worked with is they have maybe certain levels. If we think the project is going to be $100,000 or more, it has to go through this process and these types of calculations to be done. If it's less than that, maybe there's less for it because, again, they have maybe a little more leeway from a budgeting standpoint. But I don't want to forget about the small companies out there because I work with a lot of them. And, for them, $50,000 might be their entire budget, maybe for security or for whatever it may be. And we're talking, I think we just got to make sure that the ROI makes sense and you're doing, the right calculations that are appropriate for the size of the organization.
That's a great point. I did want to bring out one more point before I kind of get off my soapbox, which is I think one of the biggest ROI use cases that we have is whether to insource something versus outsource something. So then it becomes kind of a head-to-head. I think as much as possible, you want to make sure that you're comparing apples to apples and oranges to oranges. So we outsource and we get some not so good service, or potentially we insource and we get not so good service. But what I've seen a lot of times is people outsource and they're not getting what they want. And they make the decision, okay, we want to insource. How do you make that case to the business? It's usually we can do it for the same budget and get a much greater service, or we can even do it for less than what we're paying now and get a much better service, things like that. So I wanted to get, Andre, are you seeing that a lot in that, head-to-head comparison?
Yeah, we try to look at that. First, possibly because our customers want it. If they want to for IGA environment, their discussion is, do we insource or outsource? But there's another non-business case related issue about that. Is scarcity of people, for instance, scarcity of knowledge. So that often brings additional dynamics to the discussion. At this moment, we see scarcity, so outsourcing is more logical for a lot of companies without looking at the cost as themselves, because they don't have the resources available to manage their own environment, or they don't have the knowledge to do role modeling or having a secret management in place because they don't have the knowledge. Especially the smaller companies, of course, there's also, it looks like it's a no-brainer to go to SaaS environments, for instance, to have the IGA in the cloud, even PAM in the cloud. It looks like that's the new way of the new normal. For the bigger companies, they have resources, but it's still, IAM as a profession is still relatively small, non-sexy, per se, non-visible, but it's scarcity of employees, scarcity of resources that's more pressing than the business case as such. So far we didn't do it was or twice the A/B comparison between insourcing and outsourcing, and then the financial issue wasn't the same. It wasn't the trigger to make a decision, mostly in sustainability and having resources available, knowledge, experience to do it. So it's a good question, Jim, because this is relevant. People try to think, well, we make an investment based on ROI or based on financial information, but there are other dynamics playing around, having an impact on the decision making. It can also be like culture. We try to do everything ourselves. We want to do it ourselves, or we don't want to do it ourselves. It's another non-financial driver that makes or breaks decisions. So it's even though the business case is relevant, every customer wants a business case. Every of our customers is looking for what does it cost, what does it bring, and we have to manage it back to what does it bring in the broad sense, not just the financial sense. So the financial business case, it helps, mostly because it can help you make a planning for your investment. When do I have to invest what? So plateau 1, plateau 2, or sprint 1, 2, 3, when are they coming? So you can prepare for the expenditures, the costs, but it doesn't make the decision about investing or not investing. The other parts, the qualitative components are more important, and they should be more important because it's a business question, and IT is more focused on resource financial. We need to have business case to buy new laptops, for instance. That's a technical debt issue perhaps, but for the business end, you need to have the money available to see the value of investing in IAM, whether it's IGA or privileged access management or consumer identity access management or zero trust. The business should see the value of it, and part of the value is financial, but a bigger part of the value is non-financial, in my opinion.
So we talk about really kind of a bunch of quantitative and qualitative, right? There's hard investment, dollars saved. There is soft benefits like user experience or compliance, right? Or enabling the business, right? Whatever you want to take from those. I mentioned early on that we had just done a show about setting up an IAM program, and we had a question from one of our superior listeners, Chris Power. he asked about the best metrics to track in order to prove your ROI case. So let me ask that explicitly, right? What are the best metrics to track in order to prove ROI? Are there your ROI should always have these 1, 2, or 3 numbers? Is there any guidance like that?
I would say to ROI, if you're looking for this ROI, it should have at least all these components that you can identify. What are the savings? We know the costs. What saving components can we identify? Can we, because of automation, get some more efficiency benefits? Or that's a concrete ROI case. You could say that's one of the parameters that you need to identify. So the efficiency benefits should be calculated in the ROI. There are metrics for that. You could say, in the article, I show some formulas. As I said, take with a grain of salt, but these are formulas that result in a number. And those numbers should be calculated. It will not say that I don't have a industry-wide KPI for ROI investments. I don't have that. I'm not sure if there is available. There's one of those KPIs available. Perhaps you should come up with those metrics. Perhaps in the body of knowledge, we can create some documented metrics for IAM investments. But at least you should identify the different elements of the ROI calculation. So identify all cost savings and all costs. That's relevant. And in the article, I wrote about some 10 different cost saving elements with the calculation. You should identify all those for your organization. And as you mentioned before, Jeff, you said this is a small organization, big organization. Yeah, that's a big difference. One of the fun topics I found out a long time ago was in the banking sector. They have some regulations. Like in Europe, you got Basel IV and the Solvency regulation. I believe the US has something similar. And those metrics, those calculations have metrics about should your reserve as a bank be? How much is your reserve, your debt money? How much debt money do you need for bad risks? If you don't know your risks, you need to have a lot of debt money, which is not relevant. You can't use that. If you reduce your risk, you get less debt money. That money can be used elsewhere. So if you can reduce your risk, you can have more money available for doing business. And I think identity access management can reduce the risk of too many authorizations, wrong identification of authorizations of identification. So you can reduce the effective risk, thereby reducing for banks, for instance, the reserve capital requirements and make it possible for them to get more money. So by investing in IAM, you can get multiple way of additional investment benefits because you don't have to have that money. And there's a multiplier of 1 or 10 or whatever. So 1 million capital can be used for 10 million investments elsewhere, perhaps. I'm not sure about those calculations, but so these are also capabilities that you should identify for your branch, your industry. And so I'm not sure there's an industry-wide KPIs or success ratios or whatever, but we should identify all those costs and all those benefits, the financial ones, to come up with anything that you can call it ROI, but I'm not sure if you can say 10% or 20% or 100% ROI should be calculated.
So, Andre, I think that, even if your project is going to return 500% ROI, right? It seems like, that's an obvious one. We should throw money at it. I feel like if you don't get the right buy-in, the right support organizationally, it's doomed to fail. And I feel like there's a communication component to getting buy-in. So can you talk a little bit about that? What are some best practices for communicating and getting buy-in for your project and your return on investment? Or your business case, I should say.
Yes. Interesting that the business case comes up in this topic because it's the most essential for starting any IAM projects, like you discussed in the previous podcast. Try to start a project there are different ways why you should start a project, and some of them are from IT department, like for instance, more efficiency or whatever. So, and they should have a way to communicate that need to the business, because you need the funding for an investment. It's the IT project. So that means that we have to follow the normal communication lines in any organization. So IT should speak to the CTO, CTO should speak to the CEO. So to make it possible to get at least the awareness at the C level where the money comes from. If the business case is started, if the IAM project started from, for instance, a compliance issue, this compliance officer should talk with the chief risk officer, for instance, and they should speak with the chief executive officers to make sure that there's awareness about what we should need to do. That brings the money. So don't try to directly communicate with one of the stakeholders who has the money. Try to find the normal ways of communication. Try to find the relevant stakeholders that you can influence, because you cannot influence what's beyond your control. So I wrote another article about strategic alignments and exit governance, and there I showed some models that you can use for that and that help perhaps find the ways of communication between business and IT. That's the relevant part. So even if IT thinks we're making a business case, they need to convince the business that this is the business case, that the business needs it. So communication is key. And so if you want to start an IAM project or program, try to find out what's the driver, what's the most important driver for that. Is it efficiency, is it compliance, or a data breach, or whatever? What's the issue? Perhaps competitors are doing it, so that can be another issue. I know for a fact that a long time ago, a lot of IGA tools were sold on the golf course, because, well, the one CEO and another CEO were on the golf course playing golf and discussing their own investments. So you try to find the right driver for the investments in IAM, and then try to find how can you influence the correct stakeholders. Find the right way of communication. Don't go directly. That doesn't work.
So I'm going to take that. I know you wrote that other article. It's called Strategic Alignment and Access Governance. So I'll put a link to that in our show as well. It's probably a good companion document, right, to read along with the business case one. Look, I want you to get on with your evening, and I'm appreciative of your time spent with us and kind of explain this. And I think it was very helpful to talk through this, because this is super important for folks to really understand. They've got to be able to articulate this. They've got to be able to at least figure out some way to communicate the value of the project, typically, or the investment, I should say, typically a return on investment calculation, or even if it's just, hey, here's what we know, and here are maybe some unknowns, and maybe here are some soft benefits, and maybe there's a confidence level that we could apply to say, hey, we're pretty sure about this number, and maybe the further away you get from that point, there's a less confidence curve, right? But I think that being able to kind of articulate all that and pull it together helps show you've done the homework, and whether it makes sense or not is really going to be up to whoever's going to cut you the check, right, for that spend.
Yeah, and like you said before, it's all in creating awareness, communication, creating awareness that we need this, and it's not just a hobby project for one of the project managers or whatever. It really benefits the business. That's why we need a business case to show that the business needs it in whatever way. So I agree.
And Jeff, I think just to emphasize the last point that Andre was talking about with the stakeholders, I mean, if you're going to go in there and say our identity project helps enable these revenue growth, you better have somebody who's on the revenue side of the house who is saying, yeah, those are real numbers. I agree with that, because if you come out of information security and talk about how you're going to grow revenue, that's not a good place to be without that backup.
Yeah. Why is my CISO trying to figure out revenue? I want them focused on risk reduction and, other security related items. All right. We like to end shows on a lighter note. Andre, we were talking before we hit record about different languages, and you speak multiple languages. I can barely speak one. Jim probably can speak it a little bit better than I can. But talk to me about, first of all, what are the languages that you speak, and what are some of the differences maybe that you've kind of noticed to say, okay, in English, we do it this way, and in Dutch, maybe do another, or maybe other things like that. Like, what are some of your observations?
Lots of observations. I speak a number of languages, Dutch, of course, English, a little French, German, No, quantitative good. At least as a tourist, I can make myself heard. Some Latin. I had Latin on my high school a long time ago. My wife is from Friesland, so I speak. I know, understand Frisian. I don't speak it, just a few words. So quite a number of languages, and it's the fun part is that Dutch and English are quite alike because of the history. A long time ago, we got all those English-speaking and Dutch-speaking sailors traveling the world. So we got a lot of words in common. But the English language is a silly language. So it's a lot of letters you don't speak and where you write them and don't speak. We got the same in Dutch, for actual, I'm not sure. But I think this difference is perhaps not just in the language, but in the people speaking the language. There was just this case last week about our Formula One driver, Max Verstappen. He got fined by the FIA because he said a 4-letter word that deemed, well, not nice in some English-speaking languages. Whereas in Dutch language, we just use that English word all of the time without, it doesn't mean anything, just means, well, it didn't work out right, not as expected. So that's the meaning of the word. If you don't understand how we use the word and how other people use the word, the same word may end up being deal breaker. And so it's relevant that we understand not just the speak of the word, also the context where it's spoken in. And so context is key in any discussion. And so it's interesting to see that it looks simple, but it's very complex. Even if you can translate, translation doesn't bring the context and doesn't give the real meaning. So speaking all those languages, sometimes it's difficult to find the right words.
That's kind of funny because, you never know if I might be saying something in English that might be a swear word, right, in another language, or vice versa, right? Is maybe you're saying something, it's like, oh, that sounds pleasant, and maybe it's not so pleasant.
we use your words all the time for swearing, so...
So earlier you mentioned, and I guess I don't know if it's an English phrase, but like grain of sand, right? What would be the Dutch equivalent, or maybe another language equivalent of that idea of a grain of sand in that context?
Grain of salt, grain of sand.
Yeah. Or grain of salt. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
I'm I've got it wrong. Told you I could barely speak one language.
I think there even in Dutch there are multiple ways of saying having the same saying on the same words. It's hard to find it. Right now I can't come up with them. But it's we also say, or can say something like putting salt on a snail.
So putting salt on a snail, that's not good for the snail.
Doesn't look so. No, but it's all. We got some other words that I cannot pronounce, but it's all about putting too much detail on not completely important things. So, like pound wise, penny wise, pound foolish is also the same. So making small things important, whereas other things are more important that are neglected. So it's so the same from it's related to those calculations. Well, take the results with a grain of salt. It's a result, but don't make it too valuable. Don't put too much value on the outcome of the calculations. It may help, but don't make it too important. So put the things in perspective.
Jim, what are you going to have your thoughts on this? I'm sure because you've been to the Netherlands and you've tried to read some of those road signs.
Yeah, I've tried to read some of the signs on the side of the road, and it's a lot of consonants strung together. So sometimes I'm not sure how to say the words. But one thing I found, well, almost everybody in Holland speaks some English or speaks very good English. That's throughout the country. So I stayed in a town called Leiden. For the most part, I visited Amsterdam. I visited the Noordzee. And there are a lot of words like that. Like I say Noordzee, almost any English speaker can figure out that what I'm saying is the North Sea, right? And there are other words like the word for soup is SOEP. So you look at a menu, like obviously I think one of the first things you do is you start to learn food words. Right? SOEP was soup. Okay. I like soup.
You got to have your priorities, man.
You have to have your priorities. Pannekuchens. Those were pancakes. And like, again, it's like, it was surprising how much like English the Dutch language was. Now, was I able to hold a conversation in Dutch? Heck no. But I could look at a menu and figure out what I wanted and order it. And that's important.
So this is where I pull out Google Translate on my phone and like take a picture and like, okay, thank you, technology. Because I would be a very hungry boy.
You can bring Jim.
There you go. He's my Google Translate if I ever go somewhere.
Yeah, there you go. We might get lucky, but we might get pancake soup.
But that reminds me, of course, in the body knowledge, I try to write English. But if you see the articles in body knowledge, they're not what I've written. We got some good editors, like Heather and Elizabeth. And thanks to those people, the articles are good to read. Otherwise, you would read my English, which is not readable for you guys. So all praise goes to those editors. I'm happy with those. Otherwise, it would be my hobby work and you wouldn't understand what I would mean.
And you can't even just take like the article and like paste it into Google Translate because the context, right, is not there. And sometimes the translation is just doing word by word by word versus let me scan the entire document and try to infer context. Maybe AI makes that better. I mean, we're seeing improvements there, but who knows? So we'll see. But thank you for writing the article. I think it's been very helpful. Again, I'll have a link in our show notes for both of the articles that you wrote. There was the business case for IAM and then the strategic alignment and access governance document that goes really well with that. So, and we'll also have a link to you in our show notes. So people have questions, want to reach out. It looks like it's Koot in English. I pronounce it as Koot. It is Andre Koot. So there we go. Another language thing. But I'll have a link to your LinkedIn profile so people can reach out if they've got questions. And yeah, thank you so much for taking time with us today. We'll let you get on with your evening and enjoy the rest of it. As far as Jim and I are concerned, we're on the web, idacpodcast.com, X and Twitter or whatever you want to call it, at IDAC Podcast. The YouTube channel still going, idacpodcast.tv. And then, connect with us on LinkedIn, send us comments. Great question again from Chris Power, really kind of getting into the show and helping us out with, hey, what are the things that people want to hear? Let us know so we can ask our guests or we can find a guest that maybe can kind of talk with more authority on that subject. So it's very helpful for us. So with that, we'll go ahead and leave it for this week. Thank you, everybody, for watching and or listening, and we'll talk with you all in the next one.
You've been listening to Identity at the Center. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit the website at identityatthecenter.com. See you next time on Identity at the Center.